Man, thank you all so much. Man, I've got to tell you, just like Pastor Jay said, my name is Pastor Prabu Gupta, and I am the kids pastor here at the Refuge. And serving your kids, ministering to your kids is one of the greatest honors of my life. And can I tell you, man, I tell everybody, I have the best job in the world. I have the best job in the world. I have a front row seat to see our kids grow and mature in the Lord. But can I also tell you that our kids ministry is unlike most kids ministries that are out there. There's something unique and there's favor on our kids ministry. Our kids, we don't hold back. We don't pull our punches with our kids. We make sure that we create space for the Holy Spirit to move and for them to activate their gifts and for them to pray. And can I tell you, man, it has been absolutely amazing. It's been absolutely amazing. Thanks to your generosity, we've now added 2 classrooms to the back. And man, can I say thank you from the bottom of my heart? Now we have more room to grow and for more kids to come in, because it's going to be amazing. And can I say, you guys have been a part of that special journey for us. And man, I know Refuge Kids Live is on the calendar every year. We know the last week of August, it's coming. And I tell myself, I usually talk to myself, like, God, I can say whatever I want, but what is it that you want for your people? What is it that you want for your house? What is it that you want to speak through me? God, I'm a vessel, use me. And in my pursuit, in my digging of, God, what do you want? God led me to the story of Nehemiah. I was sitting in the back row right there for night watch, and I heard it clear as day. And so the story of Nehemiah goes like this. God calls Nehemiah to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Now, this is no small task, though, because the walls of Jerusalem are all in rubble. It's broken. It's on the floor, and the gates are burned down. And all Nehemiah had left to work with were people like you and me to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. But the fascinating thing about Nehemiah's story is that although he only had people like you and me, no lifts, no cranes, none of the technology that we have today, it took him 52 days to do it. And it's incredible. My take on it is it was just God's people working together to carry out God's work brick by brick, moment by moment, relationship by relationship. They were building God's house. And I believe today we are called, just like Nehemiah, to rebuild God's house, to rebuild God's kingdom. So I've titled our message today as Ready to Rebuild, because I think it's time for us to build. If you've got your Bibles, if you can turn to Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. And while you're doing so, if you can stand up so we can honor the Word of God today. And then when we're done, we're going to do our declarations that we do every week. And Nehemiah 1 through 11 says, in late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was at the fortress of Susa. Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem. They said to me, well, things are not going well for those of us who returned to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and they are in disgrace. In other words, embarrassment. The walls of Jerusalem have been torn down and the gates have been destroyed by fire. Catch Nehemiah's response here. He says, when I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Come on, can you make these declarations with me? I will hide this word in my heart that I might not sin against God. This word is life to my body and health to my bones. And I'll be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. And I'm confident of this, that he who has begun a good work in me will complete it in Jesus' name. Come on, if you believe that, church, can you high-five the person next to you? Can you say, God is going to speak to me today? You know, there's a saying that I have in kids' church. I tell our kids, guys, don't be a distraction because God might be trying to get your attention. Right? And I say that week after week after week to our kids. I guess I'm going to have to say that to you today. Don't be a distraction today because God might be trying to get your attention. You see, Jerusalem, how many of you know that God has a special place for the nation of Israel in his heart, right? And Jerusalem happens to be the capital city. And in Jerusalem, right, like they were being attacked and invaded by the people of Babylon. They've been under multiple raids. People have been taken as slaves, as captives to other regions, to Babylon. And now what's happening is now Persia came into power. Persia beats Babylon, and the Persians are saying, well, you can go back to where you came from. You can go back to Judah if you want. You can go back to Jerusalem if you want. And when the people are coming back, they don't have a city to go back to. Their city is in ruins. They don't have a gate. They don't have walls. And that's where our story picks up. You see, Nehemiah he has a job in the palace. He's a cupbearer. He's in the inner circle of the king. He has it made. He doesn't have to worry about it. But don't forget, Nehemiah himself is a slave that was taken from Jerusalem. And here's the deal. Nehemiah hears from one of his brothers that his nation, his city is in trouble, and it moves his heart. Something grips his heart. I know we as people, there are things, if you look back in our own lives, we have snapshots of things that have gripped our hearts. You know, when I first moved to America, people would always say, man, you're going to America. You are going to live the American dream. Have you heard of that one before? We all have dreams. We all have goals. Goals are things that we set. Dreams are things that we hope for. Hope it happens. One of my good friends, Jacob Hayes, he put a video together for me of his life, and hopefully we can all relate to it. So if you, without further ado, if you can pay attention to the screens, this is my buddy Jacob and his life as he was growing up, and maybe you can catch some things.
Dreams are a lot like pictures. When the Lord gives you a dream or vision for your future, your view of it's a bit blurry. You aren't sure how to share with someone, but eventually that dream may come to pass. And then you can really show someone what the Lord had shown you. One of the first dreams I remember was being some type of an artist. I remember my neighbor's dad was a graphic designer, and I thought that he meant he made comic books. So I started drawing. I drew cartoons and knights and cars, and I would spend hours trying to get better. But I almost gave up on drawing because my mom didn't like anime, so I told her I'd throw all my drawings away. My parents did build homes though, so I started to draw house plans. I thought that I could become an architect. Imagine a 13-year-old using a ruler and imagining a house that they would build. I knew my grandpa could draft, so I started taking drafting classes in high school. Then I got to calculus and realized that I hated math, so that dream kind of died. But maybe my dream of a home was filling it with my own family. I had good parents and siblings. Maybe I could create a family of my own. But when I got to high school, I started to get serious about my faith. And an older student discipled me and encouraged me to take over FCA. So a new dream was formed in my heart, and by senior year, I was the president. My dreams of becoming some type of designer were quickly replaced with becoming a pastor. I recognized a calling from the Lord to pursue youth ministry, so I did. I made a lot of good friends in college, and I even met my wife, and I got involved in a good church. But I was also faced with the reality of friends falling away from the faith. These relationships splintered into many more dreams. My first few sermons were atrocious. I'm talking list off 100 verses with no real resolution. I even had to preach KJV. Was this college degree worth it? I never played music until I got to college, and I purchased a bass for cheap so I could make a band with my buddies. For a few years, I was convinced I would be in a successful rock band. I wasn't sure where youth ministry would fit into that, and this dream quickly felt more like a frustration. But I did start playing on the worship band because of this, and I hate to say it, but we all gave up by senior year. I kept art alive by doing an art minor though. I could see a purpose in the dreams the Lord gave me, and I quickly got attached to graphic design. Maybe I could have a career in that field. It was hard to explain to my professors why I studied ministry and art. There were so many times my art felt so inferior to my classmates though. I was blessed to meet my wife in my freshman year, and I was reminded that that dream of family may happen sooner than I thought. But I had to wait 4 more years before I saw that come to pass. But as I mentioned, the dreams you see can be a bit blurry. The band didn't work out, and ministry wasn't either, and even getting my wedding day seemed difficult. So I kept working at my job at Old Navy, and I felt like the dreams were crashing. When marriage came, I felt like it was the first real dream to come to fruition. It was a good feeling. I think every kid dreams of being married. It's so surreal when it finally happens. Am I an adult now? Do I have to pay taxes? After a lot of serving and applications and a not great interview, I'd pretty much given up on that whole youth pastor dream. But I got a call about leading at the Salisbury campus, and next thing you know, I ended up leading in youth for 7 years. This dream of being a youth pastor trumped every other. After some of my childhood dreams came to pass, Vanessa and I were ready to have our own kids. Unfortunately, we lost the first pregnancy fairly quickly in, and I remember preaching a sermon on faith that the Lord would be faithful. After a few months, Vanessa became pregnant again, and we had a child of our own, and then a second, and a third on the way, and I started to consider what their dreams may be. I couldn't quiet this longing to create, though. I ended up designing for the youth team and all of those years doing some freelance. I never felt very adequate at that skill set, but I loved it too much to stop. To my surprise, I had an opportunity to take a role as the creative director at church. Looks like that design dream had purpose all along. I wish I could tell you I had a full vision of every dream the Lord placed in my heart before it came to pass, but that wouldn't be true. Sometimes I think the Lord just wants us to be faithful in the present and use what He gave us. He can work out the rest. He is a better designer than I will ever be.
That was Jacob Hayes, and one of my favorite things about that video is I met Jacob when he had just got engaged to his wife, Vanessa, and a bunch of those pictures actually had me in it. And what an honor it was to walk with him. But just watching his life made me think of my life. And hopefully when you were to watch his life, you can also relate to that and say, I can look back in the catalog of my life, and there were snapshot moments of when things happened for me, when things changed for me. When I was a kid, I wanted to be this. But then God put this dream on my heart, and then God put this dream on my heart, right? And as these dreams are beginning to come to fruition, it's this, and then it became this, and all of a sudden you're in a maze going through life. What if I told you that God today made you exactly the way you're supposed to be, with all of your likes, your dislikes, your dreams, the pros, the cons, all the positives, all the negatives, the person that He brought into your life as your spouse, your kids? God did all of that because He had purpose for your life. And all of those things work together to accomplish the purpose that He has for your life, right? Like, here's the deal. God is specific and God is purposeful. In the book of Jeremiah, He says He knew us before we were even conceived. God has a specific plan for our life. And can I tell you, that is vision from God. I'm not talking to you about dreams. I'm not talking to you about what you hope to happen. I'm talking about, do you have vision from God today? And when I say vision from God, I'm not talking about the craziest, the controversial stuff of the 21st century. I am telling you, do you have vision for your marriage? Do you have vision for your church? Do you have vision for your offices, for your schools, for your classrooms? Do you have vision for your kids? Do you have vision for how you parent? Do you have vision that's from God today? Because I'm telling you, Nehemiah, when he heard about what was going on with Jerusalem, it moved his heart. It gripped his heart. And can I tell you today that vision usually starts as a concern. Vision will come to you as a concern. You're like, man, that just bothers me. Something about that's not right. And you find yourself thinking about it when you're free. You're thinking about it. You're tossing and turning at night. You may lose sleep over it. God is birthing a vision in your heart. And can I tell you, I believe our God is a God who communicates with us. The same God who communicated with Abraham, to the God who communicated with Jonah and Jeremiah and Paul and Peter. And listen, that same God is still speaking today. And He wants to speak to you and I. And He wants to give us fresh revelation, fresh vision. He wants to give it to us. But a lot of us, God has been saying things to us for the last 4 years or the last decade, and we've been pushing it off because we get so hung up on the how it's going to happen that we lose sight of the what. We lose sight of what God has asked us to do. Pastor Andy Stanley says it this way: visions are born in the soul of a man or woman who is consumed with the tension of what is and what could be. Do you have vision for your life? Vision is looking beyond what is and seeing what can be. Are you satisfied today with what is? Or do you want to push for what can be? Is God birthing a vision in you that you've been passing on because you're so okay with tolerating what is? That we can't push for what could be. Vision carries with it a sense of conviction. What vision is supposed to do is catapult us out of the realm of passive concern. How many of us are concerned, but concerned in a passive way that we are crippled to take action? Passive concern is not concern. That's complaining. We'll get to that in a little bit. Vision gives us concern for what is and passion for what can be. God has specifically singled you out for his purpose. He's called you for something specific that's greater than you, that is past what you could have imagined. All the goals and the dreams that you came up with, God has something better. God has something better, and he's moving you towards that. Do you have vision for your life? Do you have something like that grips your heart? That you say, I'm not satisfied with what is. I want what can be. My favorite thing about Nehemiah is he's not a pastor. He's not a prophet. He's not this crazy miracle worker. Nehemiah was just a man like you and me. He got a vision from God. That says that we're all candidates for vision today. Listen, Nehemiah hears this story, and he says, when I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, I fasted, and I prayed to the God of heaven. Nehemiah's concern over the condition of Jerusalem consumed him. Thoughts of what was as opposed to what could be brought tears to his eyes. What is that vision in your life? Is it your marriage? Is it your business? Is it what's going on in the world? I can tell you, undoubtedly, this morning, I have vision from God. There is something that grips my heart. Listen, when I first started out, on my first date with my wife, I held her hands, and I said, listen, I don't want to waste your time, but I want to marry you. But don't try that at home either. And I said, listen, I am called to ministry. I don't know how. I don't have the money. I'll never be able to provide for you the way you deserve to be. But what I have is vision. What I have is knowing what God called me to do. Come on. If you have vision, you can accomplish anything today. If you have a word from God, a revelation from God, vision from God, that you're not postponing, but you're obeying, God can do so much through you. He who has begun a good work in you will complete it in Jesus' name. I have a vision in my heart. I'm going to tell you what it is. Point blank, here you go. I believe that discipleship should start in the household. For those of us who say, you know what, I'm going to bring my kids to church, and I'm going to show up, and hopefully, Pastor Prabu, with the 1 hour that he has, is going to be responsible for the spiritual development and well-being of my child. In a week, you have 156 hours. I get your kids for maybe 2 hours. Discipleship starts in the household. For those of you who think, let my youth kid jump in a car, drive to church, they got this on Wednesday, and you don't invest, and you put all that on Pastor Clay and Pastor Sam, we have a responsibility. Discipleship should start in the household. And because of that, I believe, I know this is bold, and I know this is brave, every person in this room right now should have involvement with our next generation, because it's our responsibility. It's not Pastor Jay's responsibility. It's not mine We're leading the charge, but this is our responsibility, not for the sake of the refuge, not to build vertical or not to build refuge kids. This is kingdom. This is kingdom. The state of families today is only going to get worse if we don't do anything about it but have passive concern for it. It's not good enough when we sit back and think a church this size, somebody's got to be doing it. No, we need you. We need you. I understand that it may seem like, oh man, he's just wanting us to serve. I'm not trying to convince you to serve. See, Nehemiah got this vision of this city that was broken down, that was run down. The walls had come down. The gates have been burned. Now you have a people who's living defenseless, a people who's living exposed, not just to the elements, not just to the animals, but to people who are trying to attack them. They are prone to the attacks of the enemy. And I can tell you today, I am looking at a generation whose walls are broken down, whose gates are burned down. I'm looking at a generation who's defenseless to the attacks of the enemy. And while we all sit here and take care of our busy lives, that's what's going on with our next generation. Can I tell you today, the glimpse that Nehemiah got, we are in a similar situation with our next generation. How's it possible that we've let it get so bad on our watch that the enemy could let gender confusion get in the way, depression, suicide? Like, when you and I were growing up, you will agree with me, this has gotten way worse and way out of hand. But would you also agree with me today that it's because it's passive concern instead of wanting to take action? So, see, we all get vision from God. God has been communicating with all of us. And it's not just for the next generation. God may be convicting you to serve somewhere. God might have given birth to a vision in you. Pastor Jay, just a couple months ago, went on Life Ride. God is constantly communicating to all of us. And we need to understand that. It's not up to a couple people. It's up to us. Here's the thing with vision, and sometimes I understand when we get vision, we may not know what to do with it. And the idea of dealing with the vision may feel overwhelming or it may feel scary. But can I tell you, I'm going to give you 3 things about visions that you know will always come. Number 1, vision always precedes provision. There's a principle that I generally believe, that God will always give you the what before he gives you the how. We get so hung up on the how that we lose sight of the what. What equals vision, how equals the plan. And can I tell you, this was the word I got sitting at night watch. That as much as God has tried to communicate with us, as much as we've tried to push it because we're overwhelmed or we're scared, we have now turned this room of all the people sitting, if you take all of us into account, this is a graveyard of vision. All of us that God has communicated to, but won't do anything about, including myself. This is a cemetery of vision. God is leading us. Well, I don't know if I can do that. God doesn't call the equipped. If you look at Nehemiah 2, verse 4 through 8, Nehemiah had a laundry list to do to accomplish the vision. A lot of things had to go his way. Nehemiah 2, 4 through 8 says, the king asked, well, how can I help you? With a prayer to God of heaven. That's what I love about Nehemiah. He always prays before he makes one decision. Every time. And then I prayed, and so I prayed. With a prayer to God of heaven, I replied, if it pleases the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. The king, with the king sitting beside him, asked, well, how long will you be gone, and when will you return? After I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. I also said to the king, if it pleases the king, let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates River, instructing them to let me travel safely through the territories on my way to Judah. By the way, also, king, one more thing I need from you. And please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber. I will need it to make the beams of the gates of the temple fortress, for the city walls, and for a house for myself. And the king granted all of these requests because the gracious hand of God was on me. Listen to me. If God gives you a vision, the how is not your concern, the what is. But God's gracious hand will be on you because he started something in you. Our job is not to question. Our job is to obey. Listen, Nehemiah was at a standstill and didn't know what to do. He didn't know when the right time was. He was so affected by the vision, his whole countenance changed. In fact, the king himself asked, well, are you okay? How can I help you? God will give you the what. God will take care of the how. But what God is looking for is a who. Who is going to stand up? Who has the courage to do it today? You know, I'll prove it to you. In Luke chapter 1, remember the conversation between the angel and Mary. And Mary says, how is this possible? I am still a virgin. Let me say that again. How is this possible? How can this be? How? It doesn't even make sense. How? Angel's response. You ready? Nothing will be impossible to God. Typically, he will give you a picture, and then you will need to step out in faith. As you step out in faith, he will reveal even the bigger picture, the plan. You are not responsible for figuring out how to pull God's vision for your life. We're not responsible for doing that. Was King David responsible for figuring out how to get rid of Saul so he can ascend the throne of Israel? Were the disciples supposed to figure out how they were going to make 5 loaves and 2 fish go far? Was Moses, was he responsible to figure out, well, God told me the what. Well, I'm going to figure out how to get them out of Israel through the Red Sea. Was he responsible to do any of that? It is not our responsibility to figure out the how or God's vision for our life. Our job is to obey. Our job is to obey. You know, my mother-in-law always says, and usually when I'm going through a hard time, she says, God shows up at just the right time, so you know who to give the credit to. Every time. I know who my God is. You see, when I plan for things, I don't usually think of, well, where's the money going to come from? Where's the money going to go? I just know who my God is. He's not failed me one time. He's not failed me one time. And you know that. He's not failed you one time. And he never will. But what he's asking of you is your faith. Faith is the currency of heaven. What he's asking of you is to have faith in him. See, faith is confidence that God is who he says he is, and he will do what he's promised to do. Is that our posture today? You know, I got to tell you this story. When I was a little kid, I loved playing this sport called cricket, and me and my buddies would kind of get in the backyard, and we would play cricket, and we got a little tennis ball that we would play with. One day we hit the ball over the wall, and we were all kind of in distress. We were like, what are we going to do? And I said, don't worry, I got it. My grandma has a mango tree in her backyard. I'm going to climb up this tree, and I'm going to go grab 25 mangoes, and I'm going to take all those mangoes, and I'm going to sell it to the people, because we lived on a college campus. And I said, we're going to sell it to the people on college campus. We're going to make $25, and we're going to buy this tennis ball. Great plan. Since then, even, I was like a vision caster, you know. Everybody's like, oh, shoot, all right, let's go. And so this was a horrible idea, by the way. I got in so much trouble. And so the first step of the plan was to, get on the tree. Well, my house was, you could jump from my deck onto the tree, but it was like a serious jump, right? So I climbed up to the top of my house, I jumped from one end, and I grabbed a hold of the branch, and I slid my way down, and I found the mangoes. My little buddy was at the bottom. I mean, he was all great until it got bad. He stood by me until it got bad, and so I grabbed the mango, started throwing it down, 1, 2, 3, got 25 mangoes, and then I realized I cannot get down. I was like, well, maybe I could climb back up to where I got and jump to my deck. That was a bad idea. I was like, could I climb down? Nope, that branch is way too far down. I am in trouble. So I told my buddy, I was like, I need you to go get my grandma. It's not good. My buddy ran, and he went and got people. My grandma found somebody, and this man climbed the tree, but there was still a serious distance between me and him, and he said, jump, I'll catch you. Now I gotta tell you, usually in India, when people recommend doing sketchy things, it doesn't go well. So when this man says, hey, jump, I'll catch you, in that moment, I had to make a decision. I jump, and 99% this man drops me, and I'm going to break every bone in my body. Or I jump so I get out of this situation. Can I tell you, our faith is similar to how we treat God. We tell him, we'll jump if we know what's on the other side. We'll jump, or we'll consider jumping, because right now my fear is greater than who you are. You see, when we get vision in its infancy stage, we have the opportunity to make a declaration of who God is through our faith. Say, God, whatever you say, I'm going to jump. Listen, I eventually jumped, and this man did catch me. Thank goodness. I got in serious trouble. But I made up my mind that day that I won't let fear rule me from ever jumping. I won't do it. Because God is who said he is. He's more than I think he is. And he will always accomplish what he said he will do. God's word says that he is not a man who would ever lie. When he speaks, his words don't come back void. Our faith is truly an act of worship unto God. Our response is not to question, but is to obey. The second thing about vision is often followed by pushback. Come on, how many of you know that's true? Hey, I have an idea, guys. Oh, dude, I don't know about that. Hey, guys, I think I don't know about that. Can I tell you today that resistance is relative to the vision? In other words, the bigger the vision, the more the pushback. The bigger the vision, the more the opposition. But how many of you know that anything that's worthwhile in life doing, you will meet resistance? And contrary to what we think, that resistance means we need to slow down, can I tell you that resistance usually means you're on the right track? It's an indication that you're headed in the right track. Now, I will tell you, I've heard it said this way, that's people who have these dreams, you're 35 years old and you're trying to make it into Major League Baseball, you don't have criticizers around you. You got wise counsel at that point, But when God gives you a vision, there is going to be resistance. If you look at Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, when Sanballat was one of the governors of the neighboring towns, and he knew that if Israel came to full power, then it was going to be bad, and he was going to lose control. And so he tried to intimidate them. And he said, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, what are those feeble Jews even doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring those stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Well, then there was another guy, Tobiah, the Ammonite. He said, what they're building, even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones. Can I tell you, one of the biggest ways that if you are casting vision or you have vision, one of the biggest oppositions is criticism. The common pushback to any kind of vision is criticism. Truth talk. Anytime you're talking about vision, you're talking about change. And people don't like change. And the easiest thing to do is criticize, so you don't have to change. It poses a threat to everybody around. Vision is threatening because it upsets the status quo. It upsets those who've had passive concern and are okay with how they're living. Listen, you may not be able to do anything about people criticizing you, just know it's coming. But one thing you can do is you can control the way you respond to your criticism. Our gut reaction is to always say, well, I got to defend my honor here. Listen, they're criticizing not you, they're criticizing the vision. Let God fight his battles. Nehemiah, his immediate response was to take it to his knees. And I love Nehemiah because his prayer, man, it was scary. He was like, God, you do what you got to do with these people who are criticizing me. Here's my cheat sheet that I use when I have vision and I'm getting attacked. One, I pray. Prayer realigns your vision with God's heart. You remember why you're doing something in the first place. Listen, you can take your vision and put it against the wall if you're criticizers. It may seem overwhelming, but when you put it against the context of who God is, there's no problem that's too big or too crazy for him to solve. It puts you right back and say, you know what? I have the confidence to pull this off. When you have vision, prayer, remembering who God is, and not being afraid to revise the plan. You know, sometimes we get, when a plan doesn't go to work, we think there's a problem with the vision. Visions don't change. Our plans are subject to change, but the vision doesn't change. You can't take your eyes off of what God has said. Listen, visions are refined. They don't change, but plans, they're revisable. They don't have to stay the same. Don't get plans confused with vision. So respond to your critics with prayer, remembrance, and if necessary, a revision of the plan. Finally, number 3, vision is always successful through partnership. Always. Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 17 through 18, it says, but now I said to them, you know very well what trouble we're in. He's talking to the people who are living in Jerusalem. He needs people to help build the wall. So he goes, lines them all up, and he's talking to them. He says, you know very well what trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. Then I told them about how the gracious hand of God had been on me and about my conversations with the king. They immediately replied, yes, let's rebuild the wall. So they began the good work. Can I tell you today, and I brought this up earlier, that wall that Nehemiah is building, he's not broken over the construction of this wall. He's broken over his people who are exposed to attack. But here's something about those people, the people that he's talking to. They knew the condition of the wall. Some of the people listening had lived in Jerusalem all their lives. They passed in and out of those gates. They didn't need him telling them about their gates. Why is Nehemiah telling them about something they already knew? You know, it's like if somebody were to come to your house as a guest and they start pinpointing everything that's wrong with your house. Hey, you see this window? It doesn't really open. You see that toilet over there? Man, it wasn't flushing. Hey, you know the grime and grease in your microwave? And they're going to tell you, and listen, I understand, like, how many of you that's going to get on your nerves? Come on, somebody, right? But as soon as that person leaves, I guarantee you'll be like, man, I need to get to work and figure this stuff out, right? Because for the first time, you're looking at old problems through someone else's eyes. You get used to living in that. You get used to figuring out, well, how do I make the toilet flush? You get used to figuring out, well, I don't really need that window. Well, you get used to that. You start tolerating that. Passive concern. And Nehemiah is trying to give them a wake-up call and say, yo, let me bring up the old problem so you can look at it differently today. This is a concern for all of us. You live in this house. Can I tell you today, church, is that who we are today? Is that who we are today? Do we see the walls rubbled on the ground and the gates burned down? And we're so accustomed, we figured out a way to tolerate the truth. We figured out a way to put up with all the disgusting lies and watching the next generation go through what they're going. Is that who we are today? Is this a problem that the local church, the leaders of the local church are supposed to address? No, this is a problem for all of us because this is our city. This is our Jerusalem. We're all called to build the wall, brick by brick, person by person, moment by moment, energy with energy. We are so called. We are called. The Great Commission wasn't just to the disciples. We are all called. We are all called. Listen, partnership and collaboration always leads to multiplication, not addition, multiplication. If we all work together, we are going to multiply. If we all work together, the kingdom will multiply. You can't leave it up to a few people. You know, I understand this may ruffle some feathers. Are we a society that's producing people who consume? Consumers as opposed to producers. Are we ones who just like to come in on a Sunday, do our thing, and leave? Somebody else is going to watch my kids. Somebody else is going to watch my youth on a Wednesday night. Are we satisfied with what is? Are you passionate for what could be? Are you tolerating what is? Because you don't see a problem with what is. But there's so much more what could be. This is an us problem. This is a kingdom problem. We are called to rebuild the walls. Listen, Nehemiah chapter 3, our people from different walks, as soon as he makes a speech, people come in to help. These are not like general contractors and people with cranes and lifts. These are literally families who came together. They're goldsmiths, people who worked in the little trade places, and people who worked in the markets. They're blacksmiths. They were government officials. They were carpenters. Listen, we usually pass on the responsibility of executing what God has asked us to do, to walking out and obeying what God has asked to do, to somebody called a visionary. I'm telling you, that's a buzzword today. The difference between you and a visionary is somebody who has the courage to do something about it. Somebody who's not satisfied with what is and what could be. And listen, this room is filled with them. We're tolerating way too much. We're okay with what is. Do you have courage today, church? The difference between bravery and courage. Bravery is when you're not afraid, you just do it. Courage is even though you're afraid, you do it anyway. Do you have courage today? You know, when I lead my ministry with the kids, there are moments where I don't know how it's going to go, but I have to have the courage because I know what God has whispered. I know what God has told me. This is important. As Nehemiah is talking to this group of people, this is also a blow to their pride. A blow to their pride. Listen, what Nehemiah calls them is not, you guys were not just an embarrassment nationally. Are you also an embarrassment to God? Israel was not just another nation. They had been commissioned by God to be a light unto the other nations. God established Israel as a nation through which he could demonstrate his power, his glory, and his grace. He had chosen to reside and abide with them in a unique way by filling the Ark of the Covenant. and the Holy of Holies with his glory. Today, in Nehemiah's day, the temple was gone. The Ark of the Covenant went missing. The glory was gone. He's like, what is going on here? What have you grown so accustomed to and so used to? Now this is our problem. We have to rebuild. Come on, as Nehemiah challenged his people, I would like to challenge you today. Who here wants to help me rebuild the walls of this next generation? I want to bring this full circle. I have vision. Discipleship starts in the household. But every person in this room has to have some kind of hand in the next generation. It is important. I'm not talking about Refuge kids. I'm talking about vertical. I'm talking about young adults. I'm talking about RDS. You have to have some hand. Listen, saved people serve people. You can't just come in and consume and walk away and watch the city burn. I can't do that either. And this is an issue for all of us. Can I show you what happens on a Wednesday night with our kids? I've got a video that we have. Listen, that's what happens on Wednesday night here. That's what happens on a Wednesday night. And it happens on a Sunday morning. It happens on Wednesday night at youth. It happens at the young adult gathering. Listen, our church is filled with generous people. Our church is filled with incredible people. I've said this before when Jesus says, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. That's not going to be the story and the legacy of the Refuge. This is a kingdom issue. And we need all of you. We need all of you. There's got to be something that grips your heart, that gives you passion from what could be. We've adopted this mentality, and this is like a defense mechanism or something. I do this too. We blame other people. We've lost the art of self-realization, of self-evaluation. We've lost the art of telling on ourselves, pointing the finger at ourselves. We say somebody else's problem. It's politics' issue. It's the government's issue. It's our president's issue. It's Netflix's issue. It's Disney's issue. Can I tell you? We are not called to complain, because complaining is just talking about a problem with no solution. You are called to make a change and rebuild the walls. Stop complaining. Start serving. And I know this may be hard to hear, but we need you. Our church is filled with incredible people. People who are gifted. People who have incredible marriages. People who have incredible ways with their finances. People who have incredible building skills. Our church is filled with people. You may have this idea that we're going to shove a paper in your hand and we're going to ask you to teach their kids. No. All it takes is you showing up. Holding a door. Working check-in. Having a smile on your face and telling kids, yo, I'm here for you. Telling our teenagers, I'm here for you. Consistently. We are in danger of producing consumers more than producers. And then we can't be surprised when the walls are down. And we can't be surprised to blame it on somebody else. This is an us issue. And I'm calling you today to help rebuild the walls. To help rebuild the walls, because that's our legacy. Listen, I've got some Legos up here as a symbol of your commitment. If you're saying, you know what, God is speaking to me today, I am committed to helping the next generation. I'm committing to sign up, whether it's vertical or youth nights on Wednesday, whether it's our kids, whether it's young adults, whether it's already, I want to help in some way. If that is you, can you be brave and come up and pick up a piece to show I'm committed to this? Let it remind you of what God is calling you to. This is an issue for all of us. So we've got some Legos up here. If you're wanting to, you are totally able to come up. But for some of you today, God has put vision in your heart that you've been pushing it way too long. You have been pushing it way too long, for decades, for years, because you got caught up in the how, you got caught up with opposition, you don't know how things are going to go. Listen, can I tell you today, the altars are open. Make it right with the Lord. Our God's got a second chances. He's not done with you. There's more in you. Our altars are open to come and make it right. Talk to the Lord about it. If you feel that you're not content with what is and what should be, come grab a brick and let's rebuild the walls together.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for this message. If God spoke to your heart in a special way, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at testify.therefuge.net. I look forward to you joining us again, whether it's in person or online. God bless you.